it. Get to it. All right. Benji, you're up. You're the man.
Can I start whenever? Or?
Whenever you're ready,
Okay.
sir.
What does it look like to form a people who are united in the building of a better society? And is our America the one that our four founding fathers envisioned today? Throughout world history, there has been many, many different monarchies and unions, all of which had different ideas but still had the same thought of a power over a people. And the people, until about when the Constitution was formed, were not being represented equally. Over the course of years, the governmental power has been subdued, I think, in a way that was in purpose to be aligned in the way that they wanted our country to be governed. And I think as a citizen in America today, it's very different from the culture that was set forth by the Constitution hundreds of years ago. And I think people have kind of lost the realization and maybe even the need to create a better union amongst our people. And I think they've kind of lost even an idea of what that looks like. So, as an individual in this country, we have a part to play and a role to play. And I think that if we all, understood our roles and the power that is even in us to create this better union, this more perfect union, I think things would be more aligned correctly. And what it looks like to form a more perfect union, I think, is, of course, not only an equal representation of a government and a people, but I think just a people who is understanding of what others have to say and that is at peace with what others have to say, but still while limiting what it needs to be said. So in a way, America has shifted its dynamic since, like I said, when the Constitution was first formed. And what I really wanted to hit on this essay was how important the individual's role is to play out in this society. But I know that a lot of people's perspectives and views today are just, as this place is just a place to live, and a place to, that they were born into, right? They didn't have the choice to really be anywhere else. And I don't think people take for credit necessarily what they have freely given to them when they were born into this country. So, kind of in a place of being grateful, can someone maybe take effort into putting more of themselves into a country? And I think if people would understand this, that we could all have our parts into further growing our country. That's all I have to say.
Yes, Benji. Good job.
Thank you.
Any questions or thoughts? before I read it for us. One of those mornings, huh? We need to stretch first. We do some laps around the building.
We need a PE in our class too.
I'll read it then, and then you can get some thoughts. Yes,
also,
sir.
I want to tell you, I have edited it quite a bit. I don't know, like when you printed that.
Yeah.
If you want to read it off my phone or something.
No, that's all right. I'll read the original.
Okay.
I did this I did it on purpose.
Okay.
I wanted it right away, and I didn't edit anything, and so I'm leaving all of the unedited versions in there for a reason, because was actually gonna give you the opportunity to edit after the fact, after I give notes, before we presented the final draft.
Sounds good. Because
the Constitution wasn't just written down and then just done, first draft, right?
Yeah.
And so part of anytime we're doing a persuasive essay or things like that, we want to, hopefully we're practicing. Hopefully, this wasn't your first time saying it out loud. Hopefully you're practicing it in front of your family or in front of the mirror or whatever. But they take many different drafts to arise at a convincing argument. Editing is a very, very important part of not just writing essays, but how we present ourselves as people. We should be constantly, in a sense, editing ourselves, right? We're, as the Bible says, we're supposed to be living epistles, where the word is written on our hearts and in our lives, right? The goal of our life should be one of making corrective edits in response to new feedback, encouragement, correction, all of those things. So I appreciate that. You've already taken that initiative to do that, but we'll go with the first draft, and then we'll get to the second drafts later on down the road. A more perfect union. What does it look like to form a people who are united in the building of a better society? Is our America the one our founding fathers envisioned? Throughout world history, there have been many different monarchies and unions, all of which led up to the way our country is governed today. Why did the colonies risk their lives to start a new and more perfect union amongst its people? Well, to start off, following the French and Indian War, America was being forced into paying many taxes to the British, as well as exporting all the things they produced to the British. In that situation, many Americans began to realize that this way of life could not continue this way. It just wouldn't work. The people came together and took the decision upon themselves to separate from Great Britain and form a new government. I think the idea that really should be valued and admired in these amendments and rights that they are forming together to create this Constitution in favor of both the people and the government. The beauty being a people working together to create this more perfect union. Representation was also a major component in the minds of these founding fathers. The people were always being unequally represented in the way they could speak and have a voice. The government's view on this was as if the people weren't represented, they would begin to think lesser of the idea of having governmental power over a people, which is now a big factor written in the Constitution. Has the goals and plans from the forefathers to form a more perfect union been accomplished in today's America? We see, of course, still the remainder of some very important rights that certainly precede the idea of a better society. There are almost no other countries that have the freedom that citizens of America were born with. These citizens have done nothing to earn such rights as to live in a way of freedom. So, in many viewpoints, this alone is a very big part of a more perfect union in a way, because the many lives that were lost and blood that was shed so we could be born in a country with given rights. Why it doesn't need to be earned plays out with the envisioning the founding fathers had for a more perfect union. How can we as individuals play out in this? Being an American citizen and living in American society is a completely different dynamic from the one set by the Constitution written 100 years ago. There is one thing that hasn't changed: our freedom. The freedom we have to worship freely, or the freedom of speech. Taking into account the paragraphs before this, what have we done to earn the rights given to us is nothing. So by having a view on things from a place of it is going to benefit others, or even my own self, if I have a correct mindset about what actions I'm taking towards others in public settings, or just in all aspects of life. In our world, there will always be disagreements between people. You could say anything you want to, though there is a boundary, of course. With that said, you can say many things, but what you say won't always necessarily benefit the situation. So as an individual who seeks the truth and follows after the Lord, we can be different in this way. One person's opinion is not much, but it is a choice that you can make. To not let our words be expressed or said in a place of anger, but in a way that loops around the idea of creating a more perfect union through simply your actions. So with the topics covered in this writing, does this conclude the idea that we have reached a better point, a better society or not? Or should we keep this culture introduced by the U.S. Constitution? Of course, just as all things, it can't be perfect. There will always be some source of unrighteousness in a society, but that doesn't mean we can't continue to have a goal set towards a better union in everyday society. While the Constitution brings a healthy balance and ideal, there are some things written that can't apply to today's culture. But just keeping that background knowledge produced by the Constitution, that in the laws published and amendments added or taken, or even the way things are carried out in leadership, that we all have our roles to play to further grow a stronger and more perfect people.
Good.
Very good. All right. Thoughts, questions?
I think that's probably one of the best essays I've heard you
All right.
do. I really like that it was factual and it had your opinion in it and what your thoughts were. I don't have any criticism. I think you did a really good job and you have convinced me.
Thank you.
Yeah, Benji, I felt like you did a really good job, and I felt like you were very confident, and I could feel your confidence in both your essay and when you were speaking. Yeah, I think you made some really good points as well. You did a good job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No crits.
Yeah, I got good points.
Well, I want to firstly say that I really like the way that you think. Just like specifically through this essay, just the really kind of practical, down-to-earth way of applying your ideas, primarily through the way you kind of introduce a solution to, after you first kind of critically examined America and its culture, just kind of highlighting the importance of the individual and his or her actions and choices made even on a daily basis. Those are important aspects of any culture building. So I really like how you highlighted that. And further, the way that you kind of examined our society as it is now and making general statements about society and the way that it changes and develops, and using the example of America and its history, referring to the Constitution several times. I don't know, just the way that you word things, I actually really liked it.
Thank you.
I will say there was, I guess, maybe 2 or 3 points during your speech that you did kind of, I think it had mainly to do with you were trying to remember what to say and how to say it, that you kind of faltered in your confidence a little bit, like saying I think, maybe, things like that. But again, those sort of things you overcome with practice. So I think you did expound on things pretty well. I would have liked to hear more, I think, maybe on some of the points that interested me most. Firstly being like what sort of standards that the individual can use to make decisions according to, maybe if that comes from the Constitution, you could have drawn out some of those things. And also what role, because you mentioned this primarily in your speech, like what role that I guess a source or a sense of gratitude can play in the individual view of his own life as an American citizen or as a citizen of the Constitution. Because you mentioned that as an important aspect of sometimes people take for granted what it means to be an American citizen and the freedoms that they're born with and things like that. But yeah, besides that, I think you did a really good job, so nice. Good work.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you did a very good job. I definitely saw your confidence, like Naomi said, and I really like the points you made, and yeah, it was super good.
Thanks, sister.
Yeah, I agree with everyone else. I've never seen you stand up and talk like this before, so I think you did a good job. It's nice to see when people don't usually do things and they step up to do them. It's more of like a awakening of ability in the mind, and because I don't think you've done something like this before. But I think you did a really good job, and I can't really have too much to say about the essay particularly because everyone's kind of stolen the main points from it. But it is a good essay, and a lot of the points that were made were valid. I do agree with what Noah said about like some of the, and about what Justin and all of us have talked about like not being, like kind of questioning your own thing, like saying like, or I think kind of stuff, which is right, I did too, which is fun. The only criticism I could see or make, but good job.
Thank you.
So how much public speaking or presenting like this have you done?
This is probably one of the only things I've done.
Okay. So general feedback. I'll start with your presentation. Really good. You softened as you moved through. I think if you notice at the start, your hands were in your pockets. You were very rigid, very self-aware, which again, like everyone is kind of learning. Public speaking is not easy. In fact, there's public speaking is one of the most feared things over like a lot of other things that you would think, wow, I should be way more scared about jumping out of an airplane. But public speaking is much higher, much higher, because it creates a little bit of vulnerability for us. And so I think as you went on, you certainly softened a little bit. Your hands came out of your pockets. Your movements weren't as rigid. You began to engage with your hands, which is a really good way of public speaking. In fact, a lot of people will speak and use hand gestures. People who tend to be more comfortable will do that because they're using their whole body as an expression. So again, we did talk about this last week, right? It's not just the words that we say, but how we present ourselves. That is really critical, especially when we're trying to get our point across or win a debate or an argument. I think it was pointed out as well. The thing you will have to keep an eye on is the I think. You said it probably 15 times. And again, it's not a bad thing that you think that, but that undermines your argument. Saying I think is, it's a way that we engage in conversation to kind of float the idea out in a safe way. So it's like offering, let's discuss it. But that's not the goal of this particular assignment. Own what you believe. And there's a difference there, right? I mean, there's a difference between what we think. Thinking is still, I'm unsure, I haven't really reasoned this out, I haven't come to a solid conclusion. I believe is a totally different thing, right? There's a different level of conviction there. And so when you're communicating, I think, what slowly will creep in to the person who is listening is, he's not really sure of this. He's not really fully convinced. Now again, I think because you articulated your point well, it was easy to see that you had thought it through. And it was much more probably nerves than it was that you weren't convinced in your argument. But be aware of that when you're presenting. And again, first time you did really, really great. And you definitely noticed over time it became a little bit more easy flowing. And so, and for all of us too, again, thinking in terms of this, think about the way that you interact with one another. Do you have to think about how you're talking to a friend? Maybe a new person, right? Somebody that you're not familiar with. It's a little bit more awkward, a little bit clunky. What do I talk about? But when you're in a safer group, if it's just conversation, right, it's much easier. And so when you're speaking, you really want to have that mindset, right? That I'm having a conversation with the audience. Sometimes we trip ourselves up in thinking that I've got to present this information. It's really overwhelming. I got to think about all the points that I've got to make, and I got to make sure I say it right, and again, the whole exercise of this is not really as much making sure that you hit all of the fine points of your discussion, but that you're owning your argument. And so again, really good job. You did well enough to convince. And I think a big part of that was over the course of your speaking, you softened, you relaxed, that became more inviting. I would agree. I think your essays is really well done. I think both giving a historical background for the reader to say, this is kind of what led to the Constitution, and this is the general principles of the Constitution, but then bringing it into modern day, of saying, the particular line that I think was really powerful is there's one thing that hasn't changed, our freedom. And that's really at the heart of what the Constitution is about. That's really the very meat of the discussion is our freedoms. But what does that mean, right? Mm-hmm. And so being able to take a historical understanding of that and try to put it through a modern lens, I think was really, really well done, for sure. I do think you could use, if you were to have this conversation again, what I would encourage you to do is maybe use some personal application points of it. And so one of the ways that we can make arguments our own is definitely having the historical background and kind of the framework, but make it real or personal to us. Mm-hmm. In fact, in debate, that's one of the best tools that we can use, is that it gets out of the realm of theory and now it's put into practice. And that doesn't have to necessarily be your specific life saying, this is what I've learned, but you could use examples of things that are happening in societies more specifically. But again, I think really powerfully done, and you do that in part. You do talk about, in society there's some source of unrighteousness, and then you give kind of some ideas of how to apply that. But I think overall, really well done.
Thank you.
Excellent job. Any other thoughts before we move on? All right. You may sit and take a deep breath. All right, next up is Caleb. Someone was over there like saving the best for last.
I just have to point out something. I do use my hands a lot when I speak. A lot. So, sorry.
That's a good thing.
I don't know where she gets it from.
I don't know either. To create a more perfect union. Now, we can all probably agree that our union is far from perfect. But by doing a few things, I think we could probably make it more perfect than it is. First things would be healthy disagreement. A lot of people in our culture and in our union are not very, you could say, they are free of speaking, but they don't really care what the other person has to say. In a way, it's kind of just not disagreeing. It turns into an argument where they start yelling and screaming over each other just to get the point, which isn't good for the people who are listening and for the environment, because it kind of just creates more of a, how do I say it? More of a environment that is not healthy, or the culture kind of darkens, you could say. If we could change that by at least letting someone say their opinion, even if they are wrong in that way, like if I was arguing with Noah or my dad, even if they could be saying something entirely untrue to me and I strongly disagree, if I waited for my turn and challenged them in the questions they asked instead of screaming and yelling and proving my point over them, and even I could be wrong in what I was doing, I feel like you can have an amazing point, but when you do those things, it can kind of overwrite what is the good thing that's supposed to be said. So I think if we change that, our union could come together a little more in our speech, and the people who are listening can hear and be taught and accept that more. Next would be respect. There are a lot of people that are disrespectful to our president and our government. I feel like if we would, my opinion would be, if we kind of came together and respected those who are put in authority, even if they do not deserve it. A lot of hate has gone to every president we've had. There's not really been a president that no one has had not a bad comment to, pretty much. So it's just like we should respect Emmanuel and the leaders in our group and the teachers here. It would be the same to the people in our government, because not everyone is a bad person and not everyone deserves to be disrespected, because there are a lot of people trying to make our government better. There are a lot that aren't, but the Lord has put them in that position to be taught and to be in position for some reason. Next would be okay with being wrong. There is a lot of correction that could be on being okay with being wrong. So many people will, again, have unhealthy disagreements to the point of yelling over each other, but also being wrong would be trying to prove your point so much that they would lie. A good example of that would be with this whole thing about abortion. A lot of people are protesting on how it should be a woman's choice or a woman's body. Maybe that is a true thing on some people's opinions, but some people will say that it is racist, which, as a fact, we know that's not true, because the definition of racist means you don't like someone because of the color of their skin. And I think if you would humble yourself, and the people of the culture and the union would humble themselves into being okay with being corrected and being wrong, they could unite the union with each other. I feel like if we had healthy disagreements, give respect, and was okay with being wrong, our union would come together.
All right, any thoughts before I read? To create a more perfect union. If we came together to create a perfect union, don't you think our lives would be better? We should have healthy disagreements, respect the people around us, and also be willing to be wrong. These mindsets would benefit us all. We should have healthy disagreements. Right now in the political field, a lot of people argue their opinion to the point of yelling over each other. Instead of doing this, it would be best if we could hear the other person out and speak freely when it is our turn. We should be respectful. If I'm on one side and you are on the other, and I have a strong opinion or something, but you disagree, I should still respect your opinion. Also, we should respect our president even if we strongly disagree with what he is doing. He still needs to be given the respect his office deserves. We should allow ourselves to be wrong. A lot of people in our union do not accept that they can be wrong. Some people will even make up lies to protect their thoughts or opinions. To stop this, we should not accept that we can be wrong, but still make sure we will defend our side with the fullest of truth. If we have healthy disagreements, if we are respectful, and if we are okay with being wrong, then we would find help with our lives together. Then we could finally have a more perfect union. All right, questions? Thoughts?
I don't have any questions, but I think you did an amazing job. You seemed very confident, and you definitely went with your essay very well. And I really liked your presentation and essay. It was super good.
Thank you.
I think you made some pretty good points on how to be a more perfect union, and I feel like your thoughts were pretty well put together. I do feel like there were some things that went a little long, maybe, but I do like how you had, I can't think of the word that I'm trying to say, but you had an option and a good opinion on things. So you did a good job.
Yeah, I think, is this one of the only times that you've done public speaking, or have you done it?
Sadly, I've done other public speakings, but...
Well, I think you did a good job. I definitely felt confidence as well as you were talking. There were some points where I felt like a little bit, like it was a little bit of stutter, but not too much. I didn't hear any, I felt like it was pretty authoritative in what you believed, and I think you made some true points. And I think it's very important for us to humble our hearts with each other. So, good job.
I think you did a good job as well. You made good points. The essay and speech was it was good, but it seemed a lot less, more wide scale and not personal application. Which I don't know, which is what I thought we were more honing in on, was to how to yourself to create a more perfect union, or how to be more perfect.
She like that's exactly what she's doing.
Yeah.
That's
Really?
like like almost more than anyone else.
It seemed like it was more wide scale. Okay, maybe I heard it wrong. Anyways,
Sorry,
that
I
wasn't
didn't mean to
that
interrupt.
was not my main point at all. But I think you did a really good job with the points you made, because they seemed very end point valid to something you would I'm trying to say it. Tell someone, giving the facts behind why something is valid, and I think they all applied pretty well. So yeah, you did a really good job.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think your essay was very well organized. I think so far you were. I'm sure everyone had points that they were going to go one to the other as they went through their presentation, but yours very clearly had 3 points that you were going to expound on as the primary content of your essay. So as for organization and method, I think you did really well. The execution of your essay, of your presentation was good. You did start out very confident, and I think you held on to that confidence pretty well as your presentation progressed. As it concerns maybe examples you used to expound on the points, you did well there too. I think you did tend to bounce around a little bit. So there was, for me at least, sometimes a bit of an incoherency, and relevancy sometimes, which would probably be resolved with further expounding, which I'm sure you could have done just fine. But overall, I think you did a really good job. You definitely shone today, so very nice job. That's the cool thing about giving people points like that, is it actually makes the essay a lot more memorable and impactful, because giving people clear points like that, it's like the oldest trick in presentation book is giving solid points that you expound on, and then people remember them. So yeah, nice job, kid.
Thank you.
All right, good. Yeah, so let's talk about presentation first, and then we'll go to the essay. I would agree. I think you held your confidence really well. Started out asserting your confidence right away, owning the essay. I think, as Noah pointed out, clearly having very pointed individual topics to address is really good for the listener. You're giving them this is what I'm going to talk about, and this is why I'm going to talk about it. I do think where in your presentation where you fumbled a little bit was when you started getting into the more specific ideas of application. And so I would say on those things, tighten those in, because I think that they were relevant to what you were trying to say, but they weren't as formulated out, planned out, as maybe some of the other things. And so I think what you really owned were the main points. Super confident in that. And so either one of two things has to happen as you're presenting that kind of supporting information, which is kind of what we were talking about with you, Benji, is that either you have to really own that supporting information to talk about healthy disagreements, and then I'm going to talk about this specific idea of what healthy disagreement looks like and how we apply that. You have to either really own the example that you're using, or just cut it out. Because sometimes where yours could have added a little bit more, sometimes when we add to things, if they're not really fleshed out, it will actually pull away from our main point. And so your main point was healthy disagreements, respectful, and allowing ourselves to be wrong. And if we get too far in the weeds with over-explaining it, it can pull us away from our main points. And so again, I think you spoke with confidence. I think you really held the material well, but I think where you have to be cautious is over-explaining. because I think that's where the listeners kind of had to say, okay, well, where's she going with this? The other thing that we haven't really talked about, and I think Kayla's presentation is a good example of this, using those specific topics to reinforce our point, is something called the curse of knowledge. The curse of knowledge is that I, as the presenter, have all of the knowledge. As a teacher, as somebody who's presenting information, I'm the one who holds the knowledge, correct? And I'm presenting it to you. And what we do, if we're not careful, as the person who has knowledge, is we assume that everyone understands what we're saying. So the curse of knowledge is this: I know the content really well. I have it mapped out in my brain, I've thought it through, I've wrestled with it, I've written it down, I've went over it again, but no one else has the context. And so I'm responsible to create the context for you, to help you define the words that I'm saying, and so the words that I'm speaking are the exact words that you're hearing. And sometimes when we have that in our mind mapped out, we know exactly where we're going. The problem is if we don't make those connections for the listener gets lost really quickly. And so I think in some of those examples you used, like the abortion example, it was a good example of that. You didn't quite have a really clear connection from the point you were making to that example. Although sitting back and thinking about it afterwards, I could make the connection. But maybe a smoother transition there would be really beneficial. Your essay, I thought, was really, really well done. What I would like to see from you, in particular, Kayla, is I think you don't undersell your ability to write. And so I think you were really good, you were clean, you were concise, it was short, it was to the point, but I think in your essay you could have used some of your backup kind of material. So talking about, you talked about the president, maybe talking about, give an example, or talk about when we disparage the president, what does that cause? And so I think you could add a little bit more meat onto your writing. And because I know you and I know your heart and your nervousness around this stuff, I want to just encourage you that you're a good writer. Flesh it out more and be confident with that. But I think your presentation overall was excellent. I'm really proud of you. Good job. All right, so again, I chose the difference between a contrast and compare between Benji and Kayla, and just like we did last week with Elijah and Esther, what we're seeing again is there's a lot of different temperaments, personalities, the way we come at information, the way we present information, different styles of speaking, even, and it's really critical for us to understand that as we're really talking about culture, because again, thinking in terms of how we relate, which is really the purpose of this understanding, how we relate to one another is, right, relationship and communication, and those work hand in hand. The way that we communicate is not always through the words we speak, although that's pretty obvious, right? As we're up there speaking, the words we say have power, but how we hold ourselves in the context of relationship is really critical too. I would say this as well. I want you to think, as you're sitting here and you're listening to essays, how are you processing? Do you process each presentation differently based on the relationship dynamics that you have, right? And so a sibling might hear something very different from a sibling, right? A friend to a friend. It might be somebody that, or it could even be the day. Like last week, maybe I was in a really good place, a good mood, but this week I'm tired, I'm lethargic or whatever. And so how we listen may be a little bit more of a challenge. And so relationally, right, this whole dynamic of not just presenting ourselves through writing, but really being vulnerable in front of one another and standing up and having conversations invites us the opportunity to practice this idea of culture and being confident and owning our points. And so I would encourage you guys to continue to reflect, right, upon not just what people are writing and what people are sharing, but let it be a relational conversation. How we receive that person is really, really critical. How we are even vulnerable as hearers. And I think a really good example of this today was Elijah made a point, Noah disagreed with it, and being able to come to totally opposite conclusions about something is really healthy, and it's okay. But we have to be willing to engage in that conversation and own the reasons why. And as listeners too, being able to observe that we won't always come to an agreement. on things. And so, how can we in an essay or a presentation feel like it felt very broad and not specific at all, but then have Noah say, well, no, it felt really specific and personal. Well, those both can hold weight, and those both can be true in a sense, right? But it's in the wrestling out, in the conversation, in the dialogue of that in particular to try to convince one another. And I think you did a good job. So, well, maybe I'm wrong there, which I think kind of, I don't think you meant to do this, but it kind of proved Kayla's point a little bit about willing to be wrong in a conversation, or willing to defer in a conversation. And so, again, I want to highlight that it's not just the essays that you guys are writing, and it's not just the things that you're sharing up there. The most important context we put all of this in is a relational context. And so I want to ask you, now observing again for a few weeks, and we'll get to, Naomi gets the benefit of having all of the kind of conversation around everything and fleshing things out. But how are you relating to people who are sharing? Are you willing to be open and honest with everyone? Do you find yourself trying to be, maybe you feel like, would you say, some crits? Having criticism, but you don't want to criticize that person. Or maybe you don't want to criticize that person because you're not comfortable with it. But we have to kind of get at this idea and this culture in which you can criticize without being critical. Criticism, culturally speaking, criticism is often looked at as a really unhealthy thing or a bad thing. It's not. I mean, the Bible talks about this, like the kisses of your enemy. Nobody needs falsity, right? Faithful are the wounds of a friend. And so we're not trying to hurt one another here, but the goal is that we're helping one another sharpen our skills and our ability to communicate. But really what we're doing here, as we're observing one another, is we're helping one another relationally. A healthy culture is one that communicates, one that's free-flowing and moving. And whenever a culture stagnates and resists the need and the desire to be critical, it will falter and it will fail. We all need in our life people who are going to be willing to say, hey, I feel like you could have maybe done that better, or you could have done that differently, right? What you don't need from your parents or any other person in your life is them just to say you did a great job and not give you anything you could work on or look at or observe. And so again, I would encourage you to think and perceive and relate with a measure of criticism. But there is a difference, right? Criticism that is looking out for the benefit of the other is different than me being critical. I'm not nitpicking and going, well, they did that wrong again. Because if what I hold to be most important is the relationship, then the communication that goes forth, whether it's criticism or encouragement, will be freely given, freely received. It will be safe. When I drop in a position of listening, engaging, relating with maybe some judgment or criticism from a point of like, I think they were wrong, well, that's where we walk in error. There's a difference between speaking the truth in love and speaking the truth. And the heart of the matter is always what is of utmost importance. And so I will say, I think that you guys generally do a really good job at this. But what I continue to observe is a hesitancy, at least from my perspective, a hesitancy to maybe critique. And that's something you kind of have to learn to shake off a little bit. A good person to observe, I think you guys have been around him enough, is Emmanuel. He's a really good job of having a critical eye. I see this in Noah as well, of being critical without being condescending or mean-spirited, but just saying, no, I think that was wrong. Mm-hmm. And it's said in a way that's loving, and if we receive that well, that kind of correction leads us to something that's a little bit more healthy. And I think you guys all know that, but how do we relate with that? Right? There's the difference between having knowledge of something and then allowing ourselves to experience the reality of that. And so again, that general reminder, the purpose of our meeting together here is not just for historical context or to learn something about the Constitution. Those are good things. I think they will help us give context. But what is the context that we're after? We're after a context of a healthy culture. What does that look like? How do we relate? How do we discuss? How do we disagree and challenge one another? And if we can't do it here on history class in a safe environment where we expect, right? I mean, you guys expect when you write things that people might disagree, or they might think you did it wrong, or you used a wrong word or whatever, right? Or sometimes, you try to use fancier words and then people joke about it. It's a safe environment to do it here. Well, if we're not safe here, how are you relationally going to be safe challenging one another? I mean, if you can't do it at school, how do you do that in your normal life when things matter to you, when things are important? Isn't it a lot harder relationally to speak up and challenge people than it is to do it over a history essay? Well, if we don't learn it here in the easy things, what we'll find is that relationally we don't ever challenge ourselves. And you'll become one of two people, generally speaking. And I know we're a little off topic here, but I think it's important discussion. You will either be the person that just becomes very blunt, and it's just, I'm going to say what I think. And you do, and it hurts people. And you're true, you're truthful, right? You're speaking the truth. Or you're the other person that tends to be, well, I'm going to be loving, so I'm not going to say anything. Well, the truth cannot really be true without love. And love is not really love if it doesn't have a balance of truth to it, right? If I love somebody, I'm going to be truthful with them. I'm not going to be disingenuous. That's not real love. And so it's walking, again, in balance of those two together. And so, yeah, we'll just put a pin in that right there, and then we will welcome up our final presenter. Save the best for last. Here it is. Look at all those notes.
What is a body without legs or feet? Can it truly cooperate without these instruments? Just like a country without laws and a president and a leader and a willing people, I don't think it's the same without these instruments working together. I'm not going to use it anymore. Our place in this country is, and knowing our place in this country is very important, and knowing our role to play, and also remembering the builders, the ones who came and ventured over to this country to start a new and free way. And I think bringing that together was just a beautiful thing, and knowing this freedom, with bringing in a president and a leader that we need to have to look to, but also not having just one ruler that governs and tells people what to do, and you can only listen to them. But having a corporate people that works together instead of having just one ruler, and really having a willing people that will obey the laws that were set out by a president, and truly standing together through times that are hard and the shifting of a culture. What is it like to have keeping a people whole, and living under God instead of one man? I think was really important in this country, from how it used to be. and really understanding the fundamental principles that were placed out by the formers and people before us. And another point is having a voice is a very, very beautiful freedom that we have, and just being able to have a freedom to speak into other people's lives, and being used by the Father in heaven to be heard from him. And I think that that is just a beautiful thing and freedom that we have. And also knowing our boundaries in speaking, but knowing that we have this freedom to speak to other people freely is a beautiful thing. I think that we should truly submit to a way of life and follow the laws that were laid out by the president, and but also living under God and his purpose, and always striving for the right and good in this country, and producing those fruits that the Lord wants us to produce, and truly understanding our history before us, and remembering the mistakes that were made and learning from those, and turning from those old ways, and living a new and fulfilled life is very important, and knowing the history. Lastly, I think it's very important that we know how we carry ourselves, and because it is going to be seen, not only by God, but by the people around us and the people in this country. And I hope that we can be the people that will not miss the purpose of God, and that we will truly live out his way and his will, and that we know that we are free in this state, or in this country, and that I think it was very purposeful by God, and there is a reason that we are here and in this country, because we are free here and not under the counsel and ruling of one man, but we have the freedom to work together and build a culture. So yeah, I did write a little prayer at the end of my thing. I thought I would just read it. God bless this country and its people. May we follow your will and live out your life, passing it on to the generations to come. May we fill the earth with your purpose and bless your people who are in need of your life and love. May we be that generation that practices becoming a more perfect union. Amen.
Very good.
All right.
So we're not allowed to give you our edited essays, because I feel like there are just some things in my essay that I really needed to.
Yeah. Again, yes, we will.
Okay.
I'll kind of leave that to you guys. We won't have an expected, like, that's not part of the homework. We won't go over it again.
Yeah.
But I do want to compile all of these and put them
Okay.
in a collection of writings that I'm going to then print out, submit to your parents and to the leadership of the group. And without individual names on it. So we'll publish it as Publius. It'll be like the Federalist Papers, like we're trying to convince. So making it a more practical exercise. But yeah, if you have edited stuff, because yeah, certainly there are things in your essays that need to be edited.
Right.
But I refrained from doing that because that wasn't the main point for me. It wasn't your edited version. I wasn't looking for a perfectly constructed essay. What I was
Right.
looking for was the heart, and again, the relational dynamics. So let's read through it, and we're going to go just a little long today. But we'll get through this, and then we'll get some feedback here. What is a body without legs or feet? Can we move around and cooperate as a body working as one without these major instruments? Just like a country without laws, a president, and a willing people, can we work as one corporate union? It is so important that we know our place in this country and our part to play as a people of God. We must remember our founding fathers over the past who worked their whole lives to build the Constitution in order to make this country and its people work as one unified union. Having a president that gives clear vision, humility, and focuses on the good of the country and its citizens, and also a people that would stand together and be there for one another. Through the rough times of change and decision, we must continue to strive for the better of this country and God's will for the well-being of his people. What is it about the Constitution that is so important to keeping us, the people, whole? The framework of these fundamental principles was to make an established way of life for the people of this nation, to not live under one man's authority, but to operate as a nation under God that only builds his purpose and plan, and by the laws set up in the Constitution to make order and unity in this country. Having a voice is great freedom that we own in this nation. Having the freedom to speak our thoughts and wisdom in all part of a functioning as a culture by letting God speak in us and through us, and betraying who and what we stand for to the world. With our words, we should build others up while respecting the boundaries in this freedom, and knowing that we can be a voice used by our Father in heaven. We as individuals must decide to submit to a way of life, first by following the instructions and laws that were laid out by the framers, but also by practicing the ways of life culture set by God for his people. Having a faithful culture means that it is always shifting. The people are striving to truly live it out by producing the right fruit and giving ourselves an opportunity to change our old ways. Learning and knowing our history is important so that we may fix the mistakes made in the past and live a new and fulfilled life. We must put others' needs first and work together as a set-apart people, having constant order and keeping the union together like multiple bodies working as one. The way that we carry ourselves and the way that we live out our lives will be seen by our Father in heaven and by the generations to come. May we not miss this chance of building a culture under God by using the instructions and laws made by the Constitution and understanding that it was made for us to be free from one ruler on earth, but to have a chance to live out the culture of God in liberty and his truth. God bless this country and its people. May we follow your will and live out your life, passing it on to the generations to come. May we fill the earth with your purpose and bless your people who are in need of your life and love. May we be that generation that practices being a more perfect union. Amen. All right. Thoughts, questions, comments?
I like the way that it was put together. I did like when you said, I wrote it down because I knew I would forget it, and I was right. I did. To carry yourself. I don't know why, I just felt like that was a really good point to make, and I think the points were very clear. I'm trying to think of a criticism, but I can't right this moment. I feel like I think everyone probably can improve some way on the way it was presented. I don't know what that would be, but I'm sure there's something that you could probably say, but I don't remember what exactly it was going to be. But I really do like your essay. Thank you.
I thought it was good as well. Even though you said you weren't gonna say.
I know.
I
I literally caught myself every time. I was like.
So I mean that's hard to do because you never speak in front of people. So. None of us do. That I know of as well. I knew.
Okay.
I can touch. Anyways. I like how you added a prayer at the end of your thing. You kind of ended it well because you kind of correlated a lot of what you're saying towards like what we do as a people and how we're building a culture of the Lord and those things, because that's what this all is kind of about as well, not just America, because America is only part of it, and the culture of the Lord is eternal and for all people of the earth. So yeah, I liked it. I thought it was good. Actually, never mind. I don't know if that applies. Yeah.
Yeah, I like how you related a people of God to America and the people that they're trying to build through it. I think that was a really good point to make, and something that certainly is a very good example of what people in America need to look like, to work together, to form a more perfect union. And I really did like your presentation. I think you started it and ended it really well. Felt pretty organized. There were some, I heard a lot of ums. I don't know if that counts. But like,
No, yeah.
but it was good. It was well carried out, and like Elijah said, I like how you ended it with a prayer. I think it definitely concluded the points really well and encouraged and convinced me to live better. And yeah,
Thank you.
good job.
Yeah, I think you did a really good job. I like how you started off. I like the first or sentence, how you started it. Same with your presentation and in the essay. I think you held a lot of confidence, and you did a very good job for one of your first presentations. I was surprised. Just kidding. But yeah, I thought it was great. Thank you. I'm scared.
Why?
Because you don't like the first starting.
What?
You think it's weird.
What are you talking about? I didn't even say anything. I think you did a good job on your essay. It was the overall idea and vision you had was really insightful, I think. I think even people, because obviously these essays were meant to sort of serve as a persuasive essay in a sense, because to convince a certain audience. And while primarily, like a lot of the essays were kind of aimed towards awakening people that may have seen America, taken a lot of things for granted. That's what a lot of the essays kind of poked at. Yours not only did that, but would kind of offered a greater vision as to why we do need to kind of broaden our perspectives of what America was meant to be. So I see your essay as being something that could even be persuasive and mind-changing to people who already agree that the Constitution should be looked at in a new way, and that we should kind of return to our roots in a sense. So your audience, I think, was even broader in that way, because you provide such a large vision that goes even past. It does have to do primarily with the Constitution of America, but it extends past that even to almost like the destiny of mankind kind of sense, because you're tapping into the purpose of the Lord and things like that, and the purpose He has in building a culture. So I think the execution of your essay was all right. There were, I think, quite a few things that have already been mentioned that you struggled with. There was, while it served as a beneficial aspect of your essay, your generalization and kind of broad scope of things was a bit of a shortcoming in some respects as well, because there wasn't as much narrowing in on certain things as others. I do also appreciate the prayer at the end. That was unique and unconventional, which things like that people don't expect are always encouraged, because not only do they make your essay more interesting, but also more memorable. And yeah, I think that's all. Nice job.
Very well done.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think again you had confidence. The end ums are things that will pass
Right.
over time. That's trying to recall. The content of your essay and your speaking is profound. And I want to encourage you in something, young lady. I think you are a leader. I think you are absolutely a leader in your generation. And I think yours is a voice that needs to be heard, not just here, but amongst our people. I think your insights and the way that you write have a depth to them that I think sometimes you may be fearful of shining forth. But I really want to encourage you in this. And the reason why I wanted to encapsulate this one at the end, it's kind of been highlighted, because I think you bringing it into the realm of it constitutional understanding goes far beyond the Constitution. The framers designed it to be much greater than a document that was just limited to the pursuit of American culture. I think you captured the essence of that really, really well. I think your insights and understanding of spiritual things was well articulated. And again, when you were presenting, again, seeing that softening and that more, you were more at peace and more comfortable. When you began to speak about the things of God, it was free flowing. When you were trying to recall some of the constitutional stuff, that's where you tended to have to try to get recall. And so again, I think that there is a depth to your writing and your insight that would be really well received. And I would encourage you not to hold back, because I think what you have to say is extremely meaningful. And what I've observed of you so far is a reluctance on your part to share. And I know that it requires you to be vulnerable and open, but I think you did a really phenomenal job here today. And I would agree. I think the prayer at the end encapsulates the whole of what we learned. I mean, it's a perfect way to end our time in the Constitution, because I think that prayer really encapsulates what it is that we're after here. And again, I think I commend you. I'm proud of the work that you've all done. I'm really proud of the work that you put forward, Naomi. But I do want to say, I think there is a call on your life to break out, and particularly in your generation. And I know that might be a fearful thing, but every time you speak in things like this, I find myself profoundly moved by your words. And so this is the second time where I think I just want to highlight that point. I think you have a lot to say that's really valuable and very important, and you're holding yourself back. And I would encourage you, break forth. Very, very well done. Good job. All right, so we will end it there. I will hand out, I did order some books, so they only had 3 left. So they were $15 each. So that for you guys, for the Pinson family, they just are getting some back. So if everyone wants an individual book, we can order more. Or you guys can share them at your house if you want.
Did we pay back for them yet?
Yeah, we can pay you.
Yeah, not yet. Just whenever, it's fine.
Okay, we need to do that.
You said 15?
Yeah, they're $15. And
Okay.
so this is going to be the preparatory work for next week. And so you'll read through the introduction, and you'll read through the introduction and the first 2 chapters. On there, you'll notice there's vocabulary words. And so those are there to integrate into the way that we communicate. And then there's comprehension, which will be a really important part of it. And so those will give you reflective questions or things to take notes on as you're going around.
You guys
All of
overtime.
them.
Yeah, we're over.
Doing overtime.
Yeah,
That's not allowed.
it is today.
Got it.
And so come to class prepared next Monday to discuss those things, because that'll be the basis of our discussion, since we're doing a book study.
Okay.
And so, writing notes or whatever, and we'll just kind of simply go through them. And so the purpose of Egypt, and I'm really glad that Noah selected Egypt, what we're going to study, so kind of the heart behind it.
Let me see the book.
Is going to be studying the culture of Egypt as a whole. It's going to be the rise and fall of Egypt. But why Egypt? Because, and ultimately, as we get to the end of it, we'll talk a little bit about Exodus, so there'll be some spiritual stuff applied to it. So why are we going to talk about Egypt? Because we want to understand how Egypt shaped a culture around God's people. And why in Exodus, the whole of Exodus, if you could encapsulate Exodus, what is the book of Exodus about? It's not as much about getting the Israelites out of Egypt as it is getting Egypt out of the Israelites. And there's an important distinction there, because they learned a pattern of life in Egypt that they were never intended to follow or experience. And so how do we understand God's people, the move of God's people? But by putting them in the setting, understanding the setting in which they were at. And so how do we really truly exodus? Well, we exodus from the ideas. And so you'll see even this main theme this coming week is the ideology of divine kingship, and how the Egyptians really were at the forefront of kings and establishing kings, and how that set an unhealthy and worldly pattern for the world that ultimately would come to a collision, right? When we hear about the story of Joseph, and then we hear about the story of Moses and all of that stuff, this is going to set the stage for a better understanding of that.
Man,
So,
such a good teacher.